The cafeteria on Deck 7 of the Galactic Commerce Consortium hub was exactly the kind of place that made Marcus Hale wish he'd packed his lunch. It smelled like recycled atmosphere and overcooked protein resin. The lighting came from panels that had been calibrated for 18 different species and succeeded, more or less, at pleasing none of them. The chairs were a universal compromise between bipedal anatomies that left every species sitting in mild, constant discomfort. The food, served in color-coded portions designed by a nutrition committee that had never actually eaten anything, tasted the way a corporate liability disclaimer would taste if liability disclaimers had texture. Marcus picked up his tray, scanned the room, and did the math. He'd been working at the GCC hub for 3 weeks. He was a junior logistics coordinator, one of roughly 200 humans currently contracted to work the station, which housed about 14,000 beings from 47 different species. The humans mostly sat together, not out of hostility, but out of the comfortable gravitational pull of shared language, shared humor, shared bafflement at alien food portions. There was a table near the east viewport where the human contingent had quietly established an informal gathering ground. Marcus usually sat there. He noticed it on his way to that table. A single figure sitting alone at the far corner table, the one positioned near the recycling conduits where the ambient noise was worst, and the light panels flickered occasionally due to a maintenance backlog nobody had gotten around to fixing. She was Velithari. Marcus knew that much from his orientation packet. The Velithari were among the more recent species to join the consortium's network, a tall, slender people with bioluminescent secondary skin patterns that moved slowly beneath their primary epidermis, like light through deep water. This one had deep violet outer skin, and the shifting inner glow ran in slow pulses of blue and green beneath the surface. Her eyes were large, the irises a pale silver that caught the flickering light. She had 4 arms, the upper set resting on the table, the lower tucked folded against her torso in what Marcus vaguely recalled the orientation materials describing as a self-contained posture, a Velithari gesture of social withdrawal. She was eating alone. Not just alone, distinctly, architecturally alone in the way that communicated "please do not notice me," while also somehow communicating someone please notice me, which is a contradiction that Marcus recognized because he had felt it himself, on more occasions than he cared to catalog. She had a small data pad propped against her food tray, and she was staring at it with an intensity that was either deep engagement or the performance of deep engagement deployed as social armor. He'd used that trick himself. He recognized the technique. He stood in the middle of the cafeteria for a moment, tray in hand, and did the second math. The human table was warm, familiar. Kai was saving him a seat. He could see the big Kenyan engineer waving from across the room with a grin that could power a small solar panel. The food at the human table would be accompanied by a conversation about the football match that had apparently happened on Earth 2 days ago, which would be transmitted to them in another day via the regular data packet, and everyone had opinions about who was going to win that they had formed without any actual information. He looked at the Velithari sitting alone in the flickering light, eating food she didn't seem to be tasting, staring at a screen with the focused desperation of someone trying not to feel the shape of her own solitude. Marcus Hale changed direction. He walked across the cafeteria, past the cluster of Dorthanu engineers who were eating something that appeared to be still moving, past the consortium officials in their identical gray tunics who ate in perfect synchronized silence, past the viewport, where the stars hung in unmoving reproach to all of them for being so petty about lunch seating. He stopped at the edge of the corner table. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. She looked up. Up close, her bioluminescence was remarkable. The patterns shifted with something, emotion, he guessed, or physiological response, and for a moment they flared a startled, brief gold before settling back to the slow blue-green. Her silver eyes moved over him with an expression he couldn't fully read. "The other table," she said carefully, in consortium standard, which she spoke with an accent that turned the vowels into something smoother and more formal. "That is where your species typically congregates." "Yeah," Marcus said, "I know, but this table has better light." He glanced meaningfully at the flickering panel overhead. She blinked. Then slowly, the bioluminescence beneath her skin pulsed once, a single warm amber ripple that he couldn't have explained, but somehow read as the galactic equivalent of "that's the worst lie I've ever heard." "It does not have better light," she said. "No," he agreed, setting his tray down and pulling out the chair across from her. "It really doesn't," he sat. "I'm Marcus, Junior Logistics Coordinator, 3 weeks on station." A pause. "Well," she said finally, "Senior Research Attaché." "What are you researching?" Another pause. She glanced down at the data pad, then back at him. "Consortium trade routing inefficiencies," she said. "In the outer sectors." "That sounds," Marcus said, picking up his fork and contemplating the protein resin with the resigned acceptance of a man who had made peace with his food choices. "Deeply important and also deeply boring." A flicker beneath her skin, gold again, brief, involuntary. "It is both," she admitted. Marcus took a bite of the protein resin. It tasted like it always tasted, which was to say like nothing had been harmed in its creation because nothing with actual flavor had been involved. He chewed. He swallowed. He looked out at the stars. "It's hard," he said, "being new somewhere, especially somewhere this size." She said nothing, but she didn't look back at her data pad. 14,000 people, Marcus continued, and somehow it's possible to eat alone every day. That's a pretty impressive achievement of impersonal design. "I do not eat alone every day," she said. "Okay. Only most days." The bioluminescence shifted, something slower, something that moved like tide water. "I apologize," she said. "That was honest," Marcus said. "It was honest. That's fine. I eat alone most days when I'm somewhere new too. I just got lucky that my species clumps together." "The human clustering behavior is documented," she said, "in the GCC sociological briefings." "We do cluster," he agreed. "It's one of our more charming qualities." Along with introducing ourselves to people in flickering light corners, who were very clearly reading their data pads. That flickering gold again, faster this time. She brought one of her upper hands up and touched the edge of her jaw, a small gesture, almost hidden. "I was not reading," she said. "I know." She looked at him. The silver eyes were steady and very calm, and he had the distinct feeling of being assessed by something that was very much more than it appeared to be in a cafeteria on Deck 7. "You are strange," she said, "for a logistics coordinator." "Third time I've heard that this week," Marcus said pleasantly. "Must be true." Part 2, the frequency of lunch. He sat with her the next day. He wasn't sure afterwards why he'd made that choice again. It wasn't obligation. The human table was still warm and Kai was still saving a seat. It was something closer to a sense of unfinished business, which wasn't quite right because nothing had been started, but there had been that last look she'd given him as they'd parted ways. A look he couldn't classify, which bothered the part of his brain that was in the habit of classifying things. She was in the same seat, same data pad, same posture of elaborate self-containment. She looked up when he set his tray down across from her. "You came back," she said. There was no inflection that he could read, just the words and the shifting light beneath her skin. "I forgot to introduce the second half of my agenda yesterday," Marcus said, sitting down. "Today's portion is, what's good to eat here that I haven't found yet." She considered this, with the gravity of someone being asked about matters of genuine consequence. The Veilithari preparation in Section C, she said finally. Counter 7. They have adapted it for the general station population but retained most of the core chemistry. Is it good? It is, she paused. It is the closest thing here to what food is supposed to taste like. Marcus went and got the thing from Counter 7. It came in a low dish, a collection of interlocking textures in deep blue and green, faintly iridescent, smelling of something oceanic and complex. He brought it back and sat down. Now what? You begin at the outer ring, she said. Work inward. He started at the outer ring. Whatever it was, he couldn't pronounce the name she gave it, and she did not press him. It tasted like standing at the edge of a very clean sea, like depth, like something old and calm and unhurried. That, he said after a moment, is remarkable. The bioluminescence shifted to something warm and steady, like a banked fire. Yes, she said, it is. They ate. Around them the cafeteria moved in its usual morning rhythm, 14,000 species going about the business of refueling. At one point, a pair of consortium officials walked past their table and Marcus noticed one of them glance at Vel, not at them, specifically at her, with an expression that he couldn't quite identify. Not hostile, more like uncertain. Like seeing something in an unexpected context and not knowing what to do with the information. Vel didn't look up. She knew they were there, he could tell that much. There was a slight tightening in her lower set of arms, but she didn't look up. People look at you sometimes, Marcus observed. I am Veilithari, she said. We are visually distinctive. It's not that kind of look. She was quiet. Sorry, Marcus said. None of my business. No, she set down her utensil. You are simply observant, more observant than most. She touched the edge of her data pad, a restless movement. The Veilithari are a recent addition to the consortium network. Some members of the broader diplomatic community are still. She chose her next word with the carefulness of someone picking a path through uncertain ground. Orienting. Orienting, Marcus repeated. To our presence, yes. He thought about this while he worked his way inward through the dish. That sounds exhausting, he said. A pause, then very quietly, yes, it is. They ate in silence for a while, but it was a different silence than the one he'd interrupted yesterday. This one had texture, had weight. It was the silence of two people sitting in the same space and not needing to fill it, which is a profoundly different thing from the silence of one person sitting alone. Can I ask something? Marcus said. You may ask. Why a research attaché position? If the work is mostly trade routing analysis, I mean, that seems like it could be done remotely. The bioluminescence moved through something complicated that he was starting to read, very roughly, as a kind of wry acknowledgement. Yes, she said, it could. So why here? She looked at him. The silver eyes were very level. Why did you take a junior logistics posting on a station 4 transit jumps from Earth? She asked. Marcus thought about the apartment he'd sublet. The relationship that had ended in the particular slow, civil way that is somehow harder than the dramatic kind. The sense of standing at the edge of his own life and knowing, with cold certainty, that what he stepped toward next would define the shape of things for a very long time. Point taken, he said. We are, Vel said carefully, perhaps both people who needed to be somewhere that was not where we were. Yeah, he finished the outer ring of the dish, started on the inner. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Part 3, what maps are for. By the end of the second week, it was simply what they did. Marcus sat with Vel at lunch. This was understood by both of them and required no negotiation. He brought the food from Counter 7 when they had it. She taught him the proper name for it, which he practiced until he could say it without embarrassing himself. And she informed him each time he improved with a brevity that was, he had come to understand, Veilithari for enthusiasm. They talked about work. She was, as far as he could tell, extremely good at trade routing analysis. Good in the way that people are good at something when they've been doing it their whole lives, where competence has become structural, woven into how they think. She caught things in the consortium data sets that the GCC's own analysts had missed, and she did it with a quiet matter-of-factness that suggested she was somewhat surprised anyone found it notable. She asked him questions about Earth. This was something Marcus had not expected. Most beings who asked about Earth wanted the broad strokes: geography, population, the number of wars, the sports, the dominant religions, the kind of overview that satisfies curiosity without requiring actual engagement. Vel's questions were surgical. She asked about coastal erosion patterns and what humans thought about losing land to ocean. She asked about the social architecture of small towns and why humans chose to live in them when cities offered more resources. She asked about music, not what kind existed, but why humans had developed so many distinct regional traditions when the communication infrastructure had long since made geographic isolation obsolete. "That's a really good question," Marcus told her, on the day she asked about music. "You seem surprised." "I'm not surprised. He thought about how to say it. Most people don't ask questions like that. Most people ask questions that have answers. You ask questions that have more questions inside them." The bioluminescence did the warm amber thing. "Questions with more questions inside them," she repeated. "Is that a compliment?" "Absolutely." "In Valithari academic culture," she said, after a moment, "the highest form of intellectual compliment is to say of someone that their thinking is *Velanith, which translates, approximately, as tidal, meaning that it pulls and recedes and reveals more of the ground each time." "Tidal thinking," Marcus said. "I like that." "We have a word also," she continued, with the careful deliberateness that he had come to recognize as meaning she was choosing to share something that mattered, for the specific satisfaction of a question that opens into further questions. "Sorrowful, the depth below the depth." "Sorrowful," he tried. She tilted her head slightly. The Valithari gesture of acknowledgement that he'd learned was equivalent to a nod. "What's the word for when you find the answer?" "We have many words for answers," she said, "but sorrowful is considered the more valuable state. Because the question keeps you moving." "Because the question," she said, "means there is still more to find." Outside the viewport, the stars held their positions with the patient indifference of things that have been burning for millions of years and will continue to burn long after all questions and all answers have dissolved into background radiation. Marcus looked at them for a moment. "Is that why you're here?" he asked, "looking for more to find?" Vel was quiet for a longer beat than usual. "Partly," she said. "And the other part?" She looked at him. The silver eyes and the slow, shifting light beneath violet skin, and something in the pattern of the light that he had never seen before, a quality of movement that was slower than usual, deeper, like something surfacing from a very long way down. "The other part," she said, "is more complicated." "Okay." "I am not avoiding the question," she said. "I am." "Taking your time," Marcus said. "That's fine, I'm not going anywhere." The light beneath her skin moved in a long, slow wave. He didn't have a name for that one yet. He was starting to think it was something he hadn't seen her show anyone else. "No," she said quietly. "I don't believe you are." Part 4, the precipice. It was a Thursday station time, when everything shifted. Marcus was late to lunch. A cargo routing dispute between the Dorthanu Shipping Consortium and a Terran freight operator had landed on his desk at 1100 hours, and it had the kind of recursive complexity that made him want to lie down on the floor and wait for a different career to find him. He didn't lie down on the floor. He untangled the dispute, rerouted 3 manifests, generated a formal mediation summary, and submitted it by 12:47. He arrived at the Deck 7 cafeteria at 12:52. Vel was at the corner table as always, but she was not alone. There were 4 of them around her, 2 consortium officials in their gray tunics, 1 Dorthanu representative in the layered armor cloth his species wore for formal occasions, and 1 being Marcus didn't recognize, bipedal and wearing robes of deep red that had the quality of something very expensive trying not to look expensive. They were not sitting. They were standing around her in a configuration that was not quite threatening, but had a certain geometric quality of pressure, each positioned to make leaving the table awkward. Vel was sitting very still. Her bioluminescence was completely flat, no movement, no color, just the deep violet of her skin and the stillness of someone who has made themselves very small and very quiet in the hope that pressure will move past. He'd seen that before, not in aliens, in people, in his cousin at family dinners, in a colleague in his first office job who had been the only woman in a 30-person department, the precise stillness of someone who has decided that visibility costs too much. Marcus crossed the cafeteria. He walked directly to the table, set his tray down in his usual spot, pulled out his chair and sat down. "Sorry I'm late," he said to Vel. "Cargo routing thing. The Dorthanu Freight Consortium has a genuinely impressive commitment to paperwork redundancy." He looked up at the Dorthanu representative with cheerful acknowledgement. "No offense." The representative stared at him. The 2 consortium officials exchanged a glance. The being in the expensive, not looking expensive, red robes studied him with the expression of someone recalculating an equation, because an unexpected variable has wandered in. "This is," one of the officials began. "Lunch," Marcus said pleasantly. "We have lunch here most days. The food from Counter 7 is really good if you haven't tried it." He looked at Vel. "Did they have it today?" A beat, 2 beats. The light beneath her skin flickered once, twice, and then a single pulse of gold that was gone so fast he almost missed it. "Yes," she said. Her voice was entirely steady. "They had it." "Great," he turned back to the group. "Was there something else?" Another exchange of glances. The red-robed being took a single step back, not retreating exactly, but recalibrating the geometry of the situation. The 2 officials looked at each other with the expression of people who have been doing something and are now unsure whether they should still be doing it. "We were in discussion with the attaché," one of them said. "Right," Marcus said, "and she's eating lunch, so." The Dorthanu representative made a sound that might have been disapproval. The red-robed being turned and walked away with the precise dignity of someone choosing to leave rather than being displaced. The 2 officials lingered a moment longer, then followed. Marcus picked up his fork. Vel looked at him. Her bioluminescence had come back slowly, carefully, like a light turning on in a room where someone has decided it's safe enough. The pulse of color moved through blue and then gold, and then something he still didn't have a name for, slow and deep and warm. "You didn't ask what they wanted," she said. "None of my business," Marcus said. "Is this protein resin or did they have something else today?" "Protein resin." "Okay," he poked it. "Still tastes like a committee decision." She made a sound. He had heard it once before 2 weeks ago briefly, the first time he'd said something that caught her off guard, and it took him a moment to place it because it was so unexpected. It was a laugh, very quiet, almost entirely internal but real. "Marcus," she said. "Yeah." "You are," she stopped, started again. "That was." "It was lunch," he said. "You eat here, I eat here, pretty simple." The light beneath her skin moved in that long, slow wave again, the one he didn't have a name for. "It is not simple," she said. "Those individuals, the officials, were from the Consortium External Relationship Bureau. The Dorthanu representative was from the freight authority you were just working with. The other," she paused, "the other was an envoy from the Sarathi Directorate." He didn't know what the Sarathi Directorate was, which probably meant it was important. Important things in the GCC network tended to have names he hadn't gotten to yet in the orientation materials. Okay, he said. They were not simply, she searched. They were not simply being unpleasant. They were conducting an assessment. Of you. Of my suitability, she said carefully, for extended presence within the consortium network. Marcus put down his fork. He looked at her. And you've been having these assessments since I arrived. How long have you been on station? She looked at him, the silver eyes and the moving light. 4 months, she said. He thought about that. 4 months of eating lunch in the flickering light corner. 4 months of elaborate self-containment. 4 months of assessments conducted by people who stood around you in careful geometric configurations while you made yourself very small. Vel, he said. Yes. That sounds, he said, like an extraordinary amount of nonsense to put up with. A long pause, then the laugh again, less hidden this time, more real, something with actual air in it. Yes, she said, it is. Part 5, depth below depth. He thought about asking her directly after that day. He thought about saying, there's something more here. The assessments and the officials and the way people look at you, that's not how they treat a research attaché. What am I missing? But he remembered what she'd said about Saraval, the depth below the depth, the value of the question over the answer. He remembered that she was someone who had needed to be somewhere that was not where she was, and that she had chosen to be here, in the flickering corner with the bad light, in a cafeteria on deck 7. And he thought, she'll tell me when she tells me. So he didn't ask directly, he just kept showing up. They fell into a rhythm that expanded past lunch. He started sending her data queries when he hit routing inefficiencies, not because he needed her analysis, but because she caught things he didn't, and also because her replies were the most interesting part of his workday, written in the same precise, formal consortium standard she spoke, but occasionally containing a word in Velithari that she didn't translate, which he had started to understand was Vel's version of emphasis. When she felt something strongly, she used her own words. She started forwarding him the Velithari cultural briefings she received from home, formal documents, academic and dry, but she annotated them in the margins of the digital copy with her own notes, little clarifications and corrections, and occasional gentle disagreements with her own species' official self-representation, and those notes were more interesting than anything in the documents themselves. He asked her once what the word was, the one she used more than others, the one that appeared in the margins most often, Velshin, and she was quiet for a moment before answering. It means approximately, she said, the specific quality of something that continues to matter. Something that accumulates weight over time rather than diminishing. We use it for relationships that deepen, for work that compounds, for places that become more significant the longer one knows them. A pause. We use it for things that prove themselves. Velshin, Marcus said. Yes. He looked out at the stars through the cafeteria viewport. Your name, he said, Vel, is that? The root, yes, she said. My full designation is long, but the root of it is *Velshin. He sat with that for a moment. Your parents named you Continuing to Matter, he said. The bioluminescence went through something spectacular, a full-body ripple of color that she contained almost immediately, the discipline of it visible. But for a moment the corner table in the flickering light had been lit by something extraordinary. A loose translation, she said when she had it under control, but she seemed to be choosing very carefully, but essentially yes. That's a remarkable name, Marcus said. It is considered, she stopped. Among my people, it would be considered presumptuous to simply agree with a compliment directed at one's name. The proper response is to acknowledge the kindness of the observation. So thank you. So the light moved. Thank you, yes. Part 6, what she carries. It was the 6th week when she told him. He hadn't pressed. He hadn't asked again about the assessments, or the officials, or the way certain beings in the station behaved around her with that uncertain, recalibrating quality. He had simply continued to show up, and she had continued to be there, and the corner table in the flickering light had slowly become the least lonely place on the station. She told him on a day when the cafeteria was quieter than usual. A consortium administrative calendar event that had most of the station's official population in a mandatory all-hands alignment session that humans were exempt from because the GCC legal team had not yet finished the paperwork incorporating Earth's contractor contingent into the standard meeting requirements. Just the two of them, the flickering light. The food from counter 7. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay." She looked at her food, then at the stars, then at him. "The Velithari," she said, "are not simply a recent addition to the consortium network. We are," another careful pause, "we are an unusual addition." "Unusual how?" "The consortium network," she said, "covers approximately 43 inhabited systems, 22,000 trade routes. It processes a volume of commerce that represents, by its own estimates, roughly 60% of all meaningful economic activity in the accessible sectors." "Right," Marcus said. "I've read the overview." "What the overview does not specify," she said, "is that approximately 19% of the consortium's total route infrastructure passes through Velithari space." He did the math. That was not a small percentage. He stopped. "That's almost a fifth of everything." "The accessible sectors," she said, "are not uniformly distributed. There is a region, the Velithari call it the Passage, which is the most efficient transit corridor between the inner and outer networks. By a considerable margin. Every other route adds between 12 and 40% to transit time and cost. And it goes through your space." "It goes through our space," she agreed. He thought about the trade routing inefficiencies she was analyzing. Thought about why those routes kept appearing inefficient in the data. Thought about the assessments and the officials and the way beings looked at her. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "The consortium, I mean, how long have they known?" "They have had models suggesting it for approximately 30 years, she said. "They have had confirmation for 8. And in 8 years they haven't." "The consortium," Vel said carefully, "is a very large organization. Large organizations sometimes have difficulty moving quickly when the movement requires acknowledging that someone they do not yet fully understand holds a significant position." "They've been stalling," Marcus said. She tilted her head, the Velithari acknowledgement nod. "Why are you here?" Marcus said. "Specifically, as a research attaché." She was quiet for a long moment. "The Velithari Governing Council," she said, "decided that the most effective way to begin the negotiation process was to send someone to understand the consortium network from within, to study its routing logic, to learn how it thinks about efficiency and value." She paused. "To understand it well enough to negotiate with it fairly." "So you're not a research attaché," Marcus said. "I am," she said. "My research is genuine, but I am also more than that." "What are you more than that?" The light beneath her skin moved in the slow, deep wave that he didn't have a name for. He realized, sitting there in the flickering light, that he was about to find out what it meant. "Among my people," Vel said, "there are those who hold not titles exactly. We do not organize around formal titles in the way the consortium does, but there are those who hold responsibility, for the passage, for the routes, for the decision-making around what we do with what we have." She looked at her hands, all 4 of them, spread slightly, the way he'd noticed she did when she was being precise about something that mattered. "I am one of those." "How many?" Marcus asked. "There are 7, she said, "who share the core responsibility, and 1, she added very quietly, who holds the primary weight of it." He looked at her. "Vel," he said. "Yes." Are you the one who holds the primary weight? The bioluminescence rippled. Gold and blue, and something deeper that he now understood, was the color of truth being told without armor. Yes, she said. He sat with this, the stars outside, the food from counter 7, the flickering light they'd both long since stopped noticing because it was theirs. So you own, he thought about how to frame it. You're responsible for the corridor that 19% of consortium commerce moves through. Responsible for, she said. Not owner. We are not. The passage is not property. It is our home. It is what we are stewards of. She paused. The nearest Terran concept might be. A trust, Marcus said. You hold it in trust. She looked at him, the silver eyes and the shifting light. Yes, she said, exactly that. You understand it exactly. That's why the assessments, he said. They're not assessing whether you're suitable for the consortium network. They're trying to figure out how to negotiate with you without looking like they're negotiating with you. The Consortium External Relationship Bureau, she said, has a particular institutional difficulty with the concept of a party who does not need what the consortium offers, but whose cooperation determines whether the consortium's core functions remain viable. Because they're used to being the biggest thing in the room. Yes. And you're not asking for anything. We have what we need, she said simply. We are asking only to be understood well enough that whatever arrangement is reached is honest. That it reflects actual value and actual respect, and not, she paused, not the arrangement that results from one party being uncertain and hoping the other party is easier to manage than they appear. Marcus thought about this for a long moment. Vel, he said. Yes. Can I say something that might be overstepping? You sat down at my table when I was eating alone in the worst seat in the cafeteria, she said. You have been overstepping from the beginning. I have not found it unwelcome. The consortium is going to keep doing the assessment thing, he said. The geometric pressure configurations, the officials, the envoys, because that's what they do when they're uncertain and they're trying to gather information through observation. I know, she said. And they're going to keep being uncertain, he said, until they find a way in, a context in which they feel they understand the terms. He thought about trade routing, about corridors and manifests and the logic of transit. They need a map, he said, not of your space, a map of how you think, something that translates the way you see value and cooperation into terms their institutional framework can hold. Vel looked at him. The light beneath her skin moved through something extraordinary. I have been attempting, she said slowly, to produce that, the routing analysis. It was intended in part to demonstrate that you understand their logic, Marcus said, that you speak their language. Yes. Can I help, he said. A pause. Marcus, she said. You are a junior logistics coordinator. 3 weeks originally, he said, but I've been here 6 weeks now. And I am, he added, with the plain accuracy of someone who has quietly been very good at something for a long time, extremely good at explaining routing logic to people who don't understand routing logic. That's actually what I do. Not technically what my job title says, but what I actually do. The light, that extraordinary light, doing things he didn't have words for, cycling through colors he was only beginning to learn. You are strange, she said. I said that on the first day. You did, he agreed. You were right. Why, she asked. And something in the way she asked it, the quality of the question, the weight she put on it, told him it was real. Not conversational, genuine. Why did you sit down? Why do you keep sitting down? Why does this matter to you? He thought about the right answer for a moment. Because, he said finally, you were eating alone in the worst seat in the cafeteria, and you were using a data pad as a shield, and I recognized the technique. And it seemed, I don't know, it seemed like the kind of thing you do, when something is worth it. The light moved, gold and blue and the deep slow wave and something new, something that moved like the name she had given him for things that proved themselves over time, asterisk Veltion, accumulating weight, mattering more rather than less. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I would be grateful, she said very carefully, for your help. Part 7, the map. They built it over 3 weeks. Marcus approached it the way he approached all logistics work, not as a display of intelligence but as a problem of translation. The consortium thought in certain shapes, efficiency ratios, root values, cost matrices, throughput optimization. These were not wrong ways to think, they were just one language. Vel's framework for the passage, the stewardship model, the trust concept, the Veilithari understanding of what a transit corridor meant when it ran through your home, was another language. What they were building was a dictionary. Vel provided the Veilithari framework. Marcus translated it into routing logic. Then Vel reviewed the translation, corrected the places where something essential had been lost, and they revised. Then he translated again. They went through 7 full drafts before it felt right, before it had the quality Vel described as asterisk Veltion, asterisk weighted, honest, accumulating rather than flattening. The Consortium External Relationship Bureau received the document on a Tuesday. Marcus heard about the response 3 days later, through the kind of station-wide information diffusion that happens when something significant occurs, and no one has yet figured out how to contain it. The Bureau had read the document. The Bureau had convened an internal review. The Bureau had reached out, through official channels, to request a formal meeting with the Veilithari representative. Not an assessment meeting, a negotiation meeting. He got the message from Vel that evening, text only, consortium standard. They used the word negotiation, not consultation, not assessment, negotiation, you should know that, V. He sent back, counter 7 tomorrow. Her reply was immediate, yes. They sat in the corner table, the flickering light, the food from counter 7. 6 weeks and some change, and it was simply what they did, what the place had become, their place, in the specific way that places become yours not because you claim them but because enough has happened in them that they hold weight. They will want concessions, Vel said. She was eating with more ease than she usually did. He had noticed over the weeks that the self-containment posture had slowly relaxed, the lower arms less tightly folded, the shoulders, or the Veilithari equivalent, less drawn in. Not all the way, but some. Everyone wants concessions in a negotiation, Marcus said. That's what negotiations are. The passage will remain our responsibility, she said. It was not a question. It was a statement of something immovable, said in the tone people use when they need to hear themselves say it. You have the only efficient corridor through this sector, Marcus said. They need it, and you built the entire argument around a trust model, around stewardship rather than ownership. That actually protects you better long-term, because it frames cooperation as the only functional arrangement. You can't sell something you hold in trust. They have to work with you as you are. She was quiet, the light moved. I did not expect, she said. When I came here, I did not expect to have help with this. No. I expected to be assessed, she said. I expected to be managed. I expected, she stopped. There is a thing we say, Veilithari, roughly, the tide shapes the shore. Meaning that if you have time and consistency, the larger thing will eventually yield to the patient thing. I came here with a very long timeline. And instead, she said, someone sat down in the worst seat in the cafeteria and asked if they could help with the map. The stars outside, the food, the light that was hers, moving in all the colors he was still learning. Marcus, she said. Yeah. In Veilithari custom, she said carefully, when someone assists with something of significant weight, when their contribution is not transactional but is of the kind that accumulates, that proves itself, she stopped, started again. There is a word we add to a person's name, not permanently, but as acknowledgement, Veltion as a modifier. Velshin, he said. It means. I know what it means, he said. You told me, something that continues to matter. Something that proves itself. Yes. He looked at her. The light that had been flat and still on the day he'd walked over to the table was moving now in ways he was only beginning to read, and he thought, there is sorrowful here, depth below depth, and I have barely started to learn the shape of it. Thank you, he said, Vel. Thank you, she said, Velshin Marcus. The flickering light on deck 7. The food from counter 7, going cold because neither of them was thinking about food. The stars in the viewport, burning patient and indifferent and eternal. And two people in the worst seat in the cafeteria, having found, in the ordinary improbable way of such things, something that would continue to matter. Epilogue, 6 months later. The Consortium Velithari Transit Cooperation Agreement was signed on a Wednesday. It was a significant enough event that the GCC issued a station-wide announcement, which Marcus read on his tablet during his lunch break. The agreement established a formal framework for shared stewardship of the passage corridor, not ownership. The document was careful to specify, but cooperation, mutual benefit, honest terms. He was reading the announcement in the Deck 7 cafeteria. In the corner table, the light panels had finally been fixed. 3 months ago, a maintenance crew had sorted out the backlog, and the corner was now as well lit as anywhere else on the station. They still sat there. Vel arrived 4 minutes after him. She set her tray down, sat in her chair and looked at him. You read it, she said, not a question. I read it, he said. It's good work. It is what it should be, she said. Which, from Vel, he now knew was high praise. She believed strongly that things being what they should be was a higher achievement than things being impressive. The bureau chief's statement uses the word stewardship 4 times, he said. 5, she said. You missed the footnote. I missed the footnote. You always miss the footnotes. I am a big-picture logistics thinker, he said. Footnotes are for detail people. I am a detail person, she said. Which is why we make a good team, he said. The light beneath her skin moved. He knew that one now. He'd been learning for months, the slow, patient accumulation of a language that lived in light and didn't have a written form. That one was the warmest one, the one that moved like the word she'd given him. Marcus, she said. Yeah. I have been asked, she said carefully, to return to Velithari space for the formal ratification ceremony and for the establishment of the Permanent Coordination Office. She looked at her food. The work I came here to begin has reached the point where it must continue from home. He thought about this, about the shape of what it meant. When, he said. 3 weeks. Okay. The consortium, she said, will be establishing a formal logistics coordination role. Someone who understands both the GCC routing framework and the Velithari approach to the passage. It is a new position. The role does not yet have a formal title, but the work would involve. She stopped. He looked at her, the light doing the thing it did. Vel, he said. Yes. Are you offering me a job? A pause, the amber flicker, the warm color that moved like the word for things that prove themselves. I am asking, she said carefully, whether you would be interested in continuing the work, in a different location, with different context. He thought about the apartment he'd sublet, the relationship that had ended, the sense of standing at the edge of his own life, choosing the shape of what came next. He thought about Sorrowful, the depth below the depth. The question that opens into more questions, the state that keeps you moving. He thought about someone eating alone in the worst seat in the cafeteria, using a data pad as a shield, and what it had cost absolutely nothing to simply sit down. Yeah, Marcus Hale said, I'm interested. The light beneath her skin moved in the long, slow wave, the one he'd first seen on a day in the 6th week, the one he'd spent months learning. He understood it now. He'd asked her once, finally, what it was called. Velshinithar, asterisk, she'd said. The moment when something proves itself completely. Good, said Vel, the one whose name meant asterisk continuing to matter. And the stars outside the viewport burned the way they had always burned, patient and enormous, holding everything. End. Word count, words duration, minutes at 160 WPM. Film Seed, Precipice, 2018, Emotional DNA. The tension of standing at the edge of irreversible change, hidden enormity, quiet courage, the transformative weight of a single choice asterisk. Channel, Alien Girl Romantic Sci-Fi asterisk.